Hello, my name is Keith Henley. I work for the Guild Cinema, and I grew up here mostly in Albuquerque. I started off in Mobile, Alabama, went to Texas, then Arkansas, and then in the early 70s, I came to Albuquerque with my family, my mother, and my stepfather. I am the owner of the Guild Cinema, owner manager, I guess you'd say. Primarily, what we use is what's called DCP, which I believe stands for Digital Cinema Package. And that's kind of a fancy, kind of almost like not quite a VHS DVD player, but something along those lines. It's pretty automatic. Once you set the focus tends to be right on the money. Same with framing. You don't really get out of frame things like you did when you were projecting film. It's not very hard. In fact, we had a high school intern pick it up in one day. She could do everything. She could turn up the lights, turn down the lights, start the movie. Very bright kid, very bright person. And so, yeah, it's not very hard. Bookkeeping, mostly programming of the movies, checking email, doing Facebook. I've hired some people to do some of our other social media stuff, but big one is bookkeeping and programming and working the early hours. So those are three that come to mind. A lot of the other stuff, ticket taking, which I also do, doing concessions, mopping the bathroom, cleaning the theater. That's something that I do along with the rest of the staff. So I grew up in the northeast heights of Albuquerque, New Mexico, kind of a anywhere USA suburban setting, and in the 80s. And I would be able to stay up late at night on the weekends and watch USA Network, and they would play a variety show called Night Flight. And Night Flight would show all kinds of weird, wonderful, cult-like movies, experimental films. So it opened my eyes to movies and what they could be, and the power of cinema, the transformative power of art. And that really stuck with me at an early age as a kid. So I worked a couple months at Guild Cinema where I'd have to knock on the door, and they'd let me in, and I didn't even get a key for the first couple months. And I was doing tickets, I got trained, and I just stuck with it. I loved it. Other people kind of shuffled through, and I just stuck with it. I liked the environment of a movie theater. I wanted to be around those things. And eventually they showed me how to project movies on 35 millimeter. A new owner took over, and they kind of saw how interested I was, and they made me a head projectionist. Things just went from there, and then eventually they were doctors and lawyers, professionals, and they couldn't make it owner operate. They could not give up their careers. They were putting their kids through some great schools that were very expensive, and the kids had some scholarships, but it didn't cover everything. So the Guild kind of became a little bit of an albatross around their neck, and they wanted me to buy it, and I didn't even have money really for a good used car. I felt a moral obligation to keep a place like the Guild Cinema going. So I called my grandmother up, and I said, well, this is what we're thinking. It's a lowball offer, but maybe the previous owner or the owners would take it just to keep the place going because we don't have a lot of money. And she's like, well, I'm good for that, and you don't pay me back because I'm probably dead in 5 years. She lived much longer than 5 years. So it's the first time in my life I was ever gifted a somewhat substantial amount of money to help go in on this deal to buy this movie. So that's the long story of it. Is it just kind of fell in I got lucky. I got really fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time. But, if I can offer any kind of advice to anybody who's watching this, show up, be there, be present, and be around the things that you love. And it's no guarantee, but it helped me. My algebra teacher, no kidding, my algebra teacher, Mr. Rossell at Sandia High School, he would do his lesson plan, and he'd show us how to do these algebraic things. And afterwards, when we started the homework, I would go up to him and talk about like independent films, American independent films and foreign films, because he had a love for art house cinemas, like the Guild Cinema, like Don Poncho's, and things like that. So, he was nice enough to indulge me and allow for this time during this period to, talk about art films. So he kind of kept that going. I had started that sort of interest in alternative films, be it art house, experimental avant-garde stuff out of the ordinary, and he was sympathetic to that. And so we would talk about films, and I don't know if we argue about films. Every once in a while there'd be a movie like, I didn't like that movie. He's like, I loved it, or vice versa. So, cable TV. I've talked to parents, and there's a thing going on where it's not necessarily good to tell your kid that they can do anything they want to do. Because the world doesn't work that way. But that doesn't mean it's hopeless. That doesn't mean it's bad news. That doesn't mean you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. So try to find that balance, that sweet spot between going after something you want and not being a dang fool about it and setting yourself up for disappointment. So those are the things that I've kind of learned. There are times when I should have been more ambitious. There are times where I should have checked my head, been like, no, dude, you can't do that. That's not realistic.